Where there's a whip, there's a way. Where there's a whip, we don't want to go to war today.
I'm flying! Jack!
Hey everybody, it's episode 2 time. We're gonna now
Oh gosh!
See, I warned you guys, try not to drag out the discussion because we've got more to talk about, but boy, do we need to really talk about the nuances of every little bit of thing. Yeah, this is going to turn out the way it's going to turn out. It's just, once again, I'm going to refer back to me whipping all of you guys along to review Rings of Power.
Where there's a whip.
Oh, I feel like we're those guys in Monty Python who are chanting and hitting their heads with the board. We're hitting our heads with just Rings of Power. Dominis Requiem.
Well, everybody, as we continue our journey into Rings of Power Season 2, we get a map shot and a representation of the corruption spreading from the mountain, I suppose?
Yeah.
Despite the rings being created to push back the corruption, there's more corruption. What's that, Jason?
Apparently this is actual corruption.
No, yeah, it's meant to be...
Not just like a shadow or something. It's...
No. Well, because
corruption.
As we see in this episode, this corruption represents sort of the problems that happen with the dwarves and the problems that happen with other things. Like, this is an actual corruption spreading from the mountain exploding, I guess.
Yeah.
One volcano eruption basically is evil incarnate. Yeah, but we're psyched for episode 2. Everybody's here with us. Ross, you getting ready for this?
Oh, so ready. I have because we're it's after this, I guess. But can I mention something real quick?
Yeah.
Just more on the production side of things. I noticed something very interesting. So I noticed a name. Her name's Charlotte Brandstrom, and I noticed that she is both a co-executive producer in this show, in all the episodes that I noticed, and she's the director of this episode and a co-director of the third episode. Like she directed it, and somebody else is listed too. I don't know which came first because she is a TV director. She directed an episode of Shogun. She directed several episodes of a show called Occupied in Norway. Okay. Like and you can look at her IMDb. She's quite accomplished. But it's really interesting. I want to know which came first, the producer credit or the director credit, because if it was producer first and then director, that's typically a bad sign. That is a sign that things were going not great on production, on the set,
and she had to step in.
Yeah. But if it came later, like if the director credits were first and then they just threw her in as a co-executive producer, that's a different vibe. I just wanted to mention it because as we go throughout this show later on throughout this month or whatever that we have left of this
Hell month,
I'm curious to see how many more she co-directs that she's listed in addition to somebody else as a director, because if it's more than just the third episode, the one after this, that's fascinating to me. And again, she's a very accomplished woman. She knows what she's doing directing. But that implies things to me, as I noticed that, because again, modern TV, there's about 1,000 producers on this crap. And I'm wondering if she was producer and had to step in, or she was there to be kind of their experienced hired gun, not only directing this episode, but then helping with some other directors later. And they gave her the credit.
Let me have a small interjection. First, I'd be curious what episode she directed in Shogun, because Shogun's quite good. So I'd be curious which episode she directed, because she might just be really good at these sort of high budget.
Based on the shows I've seen, I think she is.
Great. I'm
I'll
glad
find the
she's a part of this. But here's my interjection that might or might not confuse what you were just saying. They purposely purposely decided to make the entirety of season 2 directed by women.
Right. And I know that. And I know that we've talked about that leading up to this, right?
Uh-huh.
Again, we'll see how this looks. And this is not me being an ass. I'm not trying to be sexist or anything. That's why I say I wonder if she's the hired gun they brought on to direct an episode, but then also maybe to be there for some of the directors who may not be as experienced. Because it is
Like
a well-known
skilled
thing
backup.
that being a female director, certainly in film, maybe less so in television, is hard.
Yeah.
And you can get thrown into movie jail very quickly as a woman in Hollywood.
Director of Wonder Woman.
Yep. The gal that she directed that indie film, I can't remember her name. Something. Oh, she's Japanese. I can't remember her name. Anyway, she directed the indie film that got Michelle Rodriguez famous, and then she did the really terrible Aeon Flux movie, and she ain't and that movie has a whole other history to it. But whatever, she did that Aeon Flux movie. It didn't do well. Didn't direct anything until very recently. Like she got put in jail.
I don't know. I don't know if anyway. Director's jail is strictly a sex thing, because J.J. Abrams had a couple big flops and he's out. I mean, he's been in.
Finally,
he is a lifetime in director's jail at this point.
I will say this, Rhett, and you and I agree on a lot of things. So, like, this isn't coming from a biased direction in a different way. Like, I tend to lean more your way, right?
Uh-huh.
It is noticeably worse for women. Like, women get a chance. I mean, look at how many failures some of these big directors have had, and they keep getting chances. Like, it's a noticeable thing.
I mean, that's fair. I can't say that I have spent time thinking about or observing it.
No, it's something I've come into the knowledge of more recently.
Okay.
But anyway, I wonder if she was so pivotal in making, because maybe some of these, I don't know, I'll have to look at the IMDb's as the episodes come out. I wonder if some of these directors weren't as experienced and they needed her, like they had her on set to kind of help.
The ringer,
just a thought I had. Yes, just something I saw and thought of. We'll see. I'm not casting shade at not that anyone's ever going to see this that directed these episodes. But ladies, if you do see this, I'm not casting shade. I am just curious.
Well,
how dare you cast shade?
Don't cast shade. This once again reminds me of the director of Wonder Woman, who they brought in a man to direct the action scenes in Wonder Woman.
Right. Yeah.
Specifically because she didn't know what she was doing when it came to action. And the first Wonder Woman movie did so well that they gave her carte blanche in 1984, and 1984 was an abysmal failure. Yep. Which she struggled accepting that people didn't like it, which I think cast her into director's jail really quickly off of that. That massive flop is like, oh, we trusted you too much. You're out now.
Yeah. And the reason this came to mind is that the showrunners of this, that the people who are the credit of adapted for television, are J.J. Abrams cast-offs. No offense, gentlemen, but your IMDb is not very lush.
The only credit they had before this was an uncredited assisted writing for Star Trek Discovery, which sucks balls.
Yeah. So was it even the third Star Trek movie? Either way, it's not good.
No, it was Star Trek Discovery.
Okay, so I mean, that's why it came to mind, is because the showrunners themselves are not people of much experience. So
it definitely does feel like they reached out to someone who had the experience that they needed, and pulled them in to give more credence to what they were doing.
And I can tell you, at least from glancing at her IMDb, Charlotte Brandstrom is definitely experienced. She's very well accomplished.
Well, since we're discussing this, as an aside really quickly, I've seen a few people trying to analyze what exactly went wrong with season 1 of Rings of Power. And there are some YouTube videos talking about where all the money went and what was going on. And there's been some interesting observations about the fact that the show, despite spending upwards of $1 billion for season 1, perhaps for some reason, a show that big, the most expensive show ever made, had no massive recognizable actors practically in the first season. And then on top of that, used showrunners that were unproven, which also made no sense. And it's like, if you're going to spend that much money, wouldn't you use that money to bring in big name actors to help swing the show in the right direction? Wouldn't you bring in seasoned directors, seasoned writers that you had confidence in that could carry the show forward in a reasonable way? If I was going to make a show and I have infinite money, like $1 billion to make a show like this, I would immediately approach the people with a proven track record that could steer the show in the direction that needed to be. Why would you cast it 2 guys who had a writing credit in a show that didn't perform well? And an uncredited writing credit for Star Trek Discovery. And the reason why I'm clarifying that is they don't show up in the credits, but they did help in the writing room for that show.
Right.
And the only reason why they were pushed forward is J.J. Abrams recommended them.
Which is hilarious considering where he's at now, as you'd mentioned earlier.
And director's chair.
You know, his star has dwindled. What's he got going? Like, he hasn't made the things he was supposed to make for Warner Brothers, except for, I guess, the terrible animated Batman movie or show they just came out with.
I mean, he was going to be the next Spielberg. Like, he was going to be the man.
And that, boy, Rise of Skywalker killed that, huh?
Rise of Skywalker, poor performance with the Star Trek shows. Force Awakens wasn't as great as everybody hoped it would be too. Like here, his star suddenly is like, oh, you're not as good as we all thought you were.
Yeah.
At any rate.
So
as we're
sorry to derail it,
episode,
I just wanted to do it before we got deep in. So
no. So we're approaching Cause of Doom. And they're basically showing us, hey, look at our really awesome light setup to help our plants grow.
Does that work, by the way? As someone who's scientifically dumb, that the vitamin D that you need, like the actual things coming from the ultraviolet rays, don't pass through mirror, right?
Well, and I know...
I have to check that.
I know Mythbusters tested this to see if they could light a room, like transferring light between mirrors. And the dissipation is so great after the first reflection that you wouldn't be able to continue it enough to actually get enough light to supply your plants with the light required. So this wouldn't work. No.
Anyway, just a thought I had when this came up.
No, you're not wrong. So we're at the bazaar and we've got disgraced Prince Durin and Princess Disa. I was fine with Disa last season. She seems much more I know better than everybody this season, I'm going to say.
A little bit. Yeah.
Literally, like everybody's stupid and I need to steer everybody in the right direction because I'm wiser than all of the other people. She seems to be the center of the story, even though she shouldn't be, weirdly.
Yeah, and I will say though, even through the episodes I had, the 3 episodes, the dwarves are still at least mostly acting like dwarves, and the second smartest character is Prince Doran so far.
Yeah. There's a lot of you men are stubborn. Stop being stubborn, you men.
Oh no, earthquake.
Yeah, well, we get an earthquake at Cause of Doom, and it wrecks the light. So now they know have food. Anyway, we get our sand sculpture on top of a speaker. And it rings a bell. That's what it is.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, yes, it is. That's a really funny way to put that.
So we didn't show it. But when the tree lit up and got all awesome, Morphin Clark smiles. Now I'm going to say, I don't know how much time they spent trying to make her smile not look psychotic, but they finally found an angle that made it look like she was smiling genuinely and not like she was going to eat a baby. So good for her.
Unlike when she's riding that horse.
It was more of a genuine sweet smile than we normally see out of her face. Once again, this is a softer expression than we got last season. Maybe the talking to is what she needed. She's looking at a little statue of her brother. The most important person in her life, not the actual husband she would have at this point or children she would probably have as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the joke other shows have been doing? They show a have you seen this person, and it's Celeborn or whatever, her husband. And then she sees Celebrimbor, and then it gets darker, and then it's symbolically trapping him, and he says
Red.
the line. What's that?
Do you know what this reminded me of visually?
No.
You remember that game that game I played called Blasphemous? You played it too. You played some of it. Really reminded me of that. Like
Really?
the
In what
thorns
way?
coming out of him and the super red, just the way it looked, and like the red, like the really red, and the thorns coming out of him, and like it almost looked animated, like not computer animated, obviously, but like very visually distinct. It super reminded me of Blasphemous. Just something I thought, but it like I don't know. It looked good. It's just
Yeah, well, this is
interesting.
clearly a dream. She's having a dream
Oh, yeah.
about, oh no, look at what I did. There should be some sort of coming to guilt with her character, and
Yeah.
it's funny thinking about this. It's like, well, they did that on purpose to make her unlikable so that she could have a redemption arc. But the problem is, you don't
No.
open destroying one of everybody's beloved characters and your main character, because then everybody hates the show right out the get-go. If this is your plan, is to give her a redemption arc, you've destroyed her from the
It should have
the
been a different
get-go.
elf.
They should have been a different person. Celebrimbor would have been the best person as the center of the Lord of the Rings story. The guy who made the rings as the Rings of Power story. But, I digress. We've had this conversation.
You would have to have the final scene be him turn into a banner, though, which is, slightly dark.
Yeah, well, by the way, in the lore, eventually the Sauron wins and kills Celebrimbor and his family, and skins Celebrimbor alive and uses him as a banner for his army.
Oh god.
Ah.
well, which is why I want Celebrimbor. Which is why I said Celebrimbor should be the main character. It's his tragedy. But
Yeah,
it would have been a
very
really
much
good
so.
good downfall.
yeah. Well, they're having a conversation about Sauron and what we need to do, and apparently they're getting militant. These peaceful elves in their forest. They're like, "How do we attack Sauron?" and we have
no information.
And then they ask her advice, and they address her as the commander of the armies of the North. And I had this discussion with Ross the other day where it's like, what army? There's no armies. First of all, there's no soldiers in your army of the North, and they say armies of the North as if there's plural. There are no armies. There's no army. There's not one
You
guy
disbanded it in the first season,
that you're in charge of. Why do they keep addressing you as the commander of the 0 people of the North? There's no army.
And you know
in
what's
the North.
irritating? Is they could have had a backhanded way of I do want your advice, but remember you're on thin ice. He could have just said former commander of the army of the North.
Yes, that would have been a very good line.
Where he's bringing her in, but he's also reminding her you super messed up.
You messed up.
I don't. By the way, you're still an idiot.
Once again, more softer facial expressions than we normally got.
She's not just crotchety faced constantly.
Well, what did I phrase it? Sourpuss last season? It was just constant sourpuss.
Yeah.
I think this is their equivalent of character growth and development. Is she's no longer at the RBF.
Yeah. Anyway, he's like, well, we need to send somebody after Celebrimbor. Waters and drying. There are a lot of really bad lines in the show. Can I tell you?
Yeah, they're trying to be super flowery, and it does not land at all. I didn't mention it, but in that first episode, she has this line. I don't know if it was in the recap, but I don't think it was, where she's like, then why does it still hurt here? And she like points to her own chest. It's like, yeah, because he's asking her about like, no, that feeling came from you, or like anyway. And she like, it's just the worst lines. They're trying to be flowery and like have a prose, and it never lands ever.
Well, this is her desire for redemption, but her also desire for vengeance is the same. So I don't know how genuine the redemption arc tends to be. But she's like, I must face him, and I alone can slay him. I was like, it's not that hard,
This
apparently.
is the same you as last time. Like, my lord.
You're just as psychotic, but apparently it's not as hard to kill him as we thought it was, so I'm pretty sure you can pull it off.
Look, just get 6 or 8 guys, surround him, and just really give him a good shanking with a screwdriver.
Well,
They'll
there's no glorious duel. There's just a bunch of elves standing around kicking him on the ground like they're in the prison. Like they're in the prison yard, and they're all just booting him while he's in the ground.
They literally just recreate scene for scene American History X, where he curb stomps that guy.
Yeah.
But it's Galadriel curb stomping Sauron. And she just like shows her tattoo on her chest that's just like an elven leaf or whatever.
Instead of the swastika, yeah.
This means you're not welcome here. Like,
you're on the wrong side of town there, little man.
God.
Anyway, you once considered a friend. Halbrand is not a... He's like, yeah, Sauron, you mean? Sauron, your friend? Your buddy?
Your good pal that you thought was a fair of look?
She still keeps trying to think of him as a different person. Oh, looks like you were manipulated really heavily, except you weren't, because this was all your decision.
We're going to say you were, though, even though there's actually no evidence for that.
Well,
too bad we didn't film that ending differently, huh?
Important to point out, they spent a lot of time implying she was manipulated, and it was all her. Literally, she's like, "Oh, he played me like a flute," or whatever the line is, and it's like, "Lady, he told you he stole that symbol. He's not a king, and then you pressured him into being the king to the point where they're standing before Muriel, the Queen Regent of Numenor." And he's like, look, this has been exaggerated. I'm not really the king. And she's like, excuse me, we're planning this whole campaign based upon the fact we're helping you regain your lands. If there's an issue here, I need to know about it. And she's like, no. He's really the king, though. And he's like, I never said that, but I guess.
Sure. Why not? We're this deep in.
All of this was Galadriel's doing. He manipulated nothing, which is why when we had our final discussions about season 1, why I suggested they should have had a cutscene showing him manipulating her subtly, and that what she remembers is what not really happened. At least something to show that he was clever doing so. All of this was her fault. She can't claim that he did anything to her. She did it to him. She propelled him into the position that he was in.
Oh no, Val. Now she's back.
Not only that, but the evidence we do have is of him doing the opposite. Like when he was saying, you'll get more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Yeah, or however.
Basically, he's telling her to tone it down.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's the closest we saw to him being manipulative. Giving
while
advice.
She's screaming at the ruler of another nation.
And like...
There's a tempest in me. I mean,
some of this I'll mention, like I'll delve into this a little bit further in the next episode. But that's the other thing. In the last episode, I had a note of he's a whisperer now. Now they're making him like this, like he's going to try and manipulate people. Why didn't you do that last season?
Yes.
Like I realize they're trying to show that, like, oh, he wanted to be good, but then he wouldn't have been bullied by this 5'2" blonde lady. Like he would have just been like, yeah. Buzz off. I'm in the guild now. Like, ugh.
Well, here we are, back in Eregion, where Halbrand is just sitting here going like, I still want to talk to Celebrimbor, and she's like, no, and he's like, I'll wait. And then she goes and tells Celebrimbor he's not going to leave, and he's like, oh. This is most of what happens. We'll
ignore him.
It's funny, he's very aware a messenger should be on the way giving word about what's gone on with the rings. Like he knows a messenger is coming. Here's maybe we'll get this explanation.
And this is where we finally get some manipulation from Sauron.
Well, maybe.
Finally.
We don't know how they die is the problem, Jason.
No, not this.
Oh.
His conversation with Celebrimbor, where he's like, "Oh,
okay, well,
you know how it is."
We're not quite there yet. My point with this scene is they're showing the messenger didn't arrive to tell Celebrimbor that Halbrand is Sauron. And we don't know why
there's no reason. Yeah.
We don't know why they're dead. There's no explanation.
No.
Did
None
Sauron encounter them on the road? Were these orcs? We don't know what happened.
And they may tell us later. I bet they don't. They may. Because my assumption was it was the orcs that Adar sent to watch him. But then why would they, to watch Sauron, but why would they, well, Halbrand, but why would they kill those guys? They don't know.
Yeah, it just betrays their presence in the region rather than we're spying on this dude.
It also makes you question the elves. Like, why would you send messengers out alone when you know the orcs are ascendant? But whatever.
Yeah. Especially as vital as this information is, as devastatingly vital is it for Celebrimbor to know that Sauron helped make the rings and manipulated what was happening.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you send more than just a couple dudes to
maybe send 12 guys with the messengers? You know,
right?
Something. Split them up.
Because if it was Sauron, we know Sauron can't beat 12 guys. He can beat 2.
No. He'll get surrounded and he's done. Yeah. It's over.
Well, it's 3.
They'll kick him in the prison yard.
And this is one of the times when time actually matters. Because we know that
time has passed.
Exactly. But we know that it's been long enough for them to go from Lindon to Eregion, and for Halbrand to go from Mordor up to Eregion. So we know that this is one of the times when they're like, oh yeah, time has passed.
Yeah.
Rather than just jump cutting and
yeah.
Now we're back to the stranger stuff. We got cool looking room people.
You are wasted. Your design is wasted here. I'm so sorry.
Here's a great scene. So that Feminem or
Feminem
girl shady or whatever we're gonna call her. Nazgul.
Nazgul.
So she, when she died in last season and turned into moss, apparently they gathered the moss.
Moth magic, baby.
Moth-based magic. And she releases this lady, this guy who suspiciously looks like Saruman. Whoever knows who this guy is.
Saruman by way of like,
coloring.
You know, Punjab or whatever. Like he's like, he looks like he's from India. It's just very funny.
Well, she gets revived.
Which works. Just funny.
So we finally figure out where the Nazgals came from, but we have no idea what's going on here. There's no logic to any of this because they were out supposedly trying to find
looking for Sauron. Yeah.
Yeah. And so why is this wizard dude looking for Sauron? And who are these rape girls that are going around on his behalf?
They're not information they've given us yet, as far as we can tell.
We have nothing here.
This is some evil wizard with evil acolytes, and they've got a plan, and they haven't told us yet.
Yeah.
Ross.
Which, there's other shows that do that where you have like mysterious magic users, but you like, I'm thinking of Game of Thrones. In the first season, like, you have that red-haired woman who's helping, I think, Stannis Baratheon.
Sure.
Like, you don't know what her deal is, really, but you know why she's there. She's there because he wants to use her magic to help him. And they show her use that magic to supposedly help him. Like, she assassinates a guy. I think his brother. And, but, like, this stuff, it's just nothing but mystery box all the way through. They're looking for Sauron. Right, but why? Like,
who are they?
And it's okay if I don't know who they are, but then you got to give me a reason for why it matters that they like. And then maybe the next episode after, maybe episode 4 or 5, they'll tell us why he needs to find Sauron.
Yeah, we may yet
I
still
bet
learn.
they don't.
But
It's really frustrating because we had a season where we didn't know who these people were or why Sauron mattered to them, and we still don't.
Well, which is the problem with mystery box storytelling is they like to reveal mysteries that make you wonder, but when you finally learn the mystery, you just find out it's an empty box and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So we may learn yet who these people are, but we just don't know yet. And
did you notice the little flag that guy had with the mask? That he had like a white eye on that flag.
Oh yeah, there's very Sauron themed imagery.
Did he jack that from this guy?
I don't know.
He's just a copycat. Man, Sauron sucks.
Well,
no originality.
So here's an extremely confusing scene. And he basically goes, "What word? Sauron's shadow is deepening. He's taken a new form. I don't know what it is." And then he's like, "What about the Istar, who's the stranger, who's a wizard, but we don't know which?" And he's like, "I've heard of this guy moving across the landscape or whatever." I'm trying to get to the specific line I'm trying to reference here. Whispers of an old man in rags with 2 halflings. They're already aware of Poppy showing up. So they're very aware of what he's doing. He is lost, vulnerable. We're going to get him.
It will not be for long. Oh.
We must reach him before he learns to harness his power. So... here's the important part of this. He's like, "I use this blood or magic or whatever to revive you. What do you know? Nothing. I'm going to tell you." He basically says, "Hey, there's this guy. We should do something." And he's like, "Well, why did I revive you then? You failed the first time, and you have no new information. Maybe I shouldn't have revived you when I just revived you." It's a really confusing line of dialogue.
Well,
I just revived you. Maybe I shouldn't have revived you.
Because
he wouldn't have known until he revived her. So
I was saying maybe that's what they're trying to show, but then he makes it seem like I knew you wouldn't know nothing anyway. It's like, well, okay, like sure.
Well, it was like you knew what she knew already. And then you go, "Well, maybe I shouldn't have wasted the time." But you knew what she knew. Why did you need to bring her?
Yeah, they should have just played that a little differently, I think. Because I think they're trying to say that, like, he didn't know that she didn't know anything that he didn't already know. God, what a terrible sentence. Anyway.
Yeah.
But then he should have been like, I suspected as much. It seems I've wasted my time.
yeah,
Just play it like that rather than like, well, anyway, that was a waste. It's like he just played it in such a way that it's confusing, and I don't know. Like, it was very strange.
Well, we're gonna set aside Feminem to go rap with Dr. Dre for a bit here.
Oh man, love me some Drizzy Dre.
So there's an interesting line here with this character, this rune character, where I guess they have wounds on their, like, leprosy or something, like whatever's wrong with their skin or wounds on their flesh. Whatever the cause is, and I guess the deal is he'll heal it if he goes and kills the stranger man. As cool as those masks are, if their faces are messed up, why do the masks not have noses? Is strange. Do you know what I mean?
Because, yeah.
That's like, well, if the mask is
they
to
don't got
cover up
noses.
your deformity, why would you also recreate that deformity on your mask?
Yeah, I guess it would be like, what is it, King Baldwin of Jerusalem, like his mask just having no nose as well. It's like, ugh, why'd you do that?
Well, they're having conversations, and we go to commercial.
Delightful
As I'm
app.
gonna let this hide for a minute as we commercial. Thoughts
So
at the moment?
yeah, why would you decide to trek across the desert without adequate provisions?
Because he unfortunately landed amongst grub people who have nothing but an offensive accent and they're gullible. I don't know. Like uh, it's so strange. Like I don't know. It's very odd that well anyway. I'm wearing this camo net that you guys had, and it's fine. Made some shoes. I like the look of where that wizard hangs out, but boy, do you think Dune was a big deal lately? Because it kind of
Yeah.
looks like something you see in Dune.
Yeah, it was perhaps a little connection to Dune because Dune was really hot right now.
Little like big sandstone monoliths in a big hallway, sunlight pouring through. Just looks real Duney.
Dune's hot right now.
It's hot right now.
Well, here's Poppy, and she's looking for food, and they can't find food. And then she's like, "Why don't you summon food like before?" And she's like, "He can't because he needs stick."
He's scared.
Well,
he needs stick.
He needs stick. Well, they call it a gand, and she's like, "Well, there are gands all over the place. There's sticks all over the place." Like she's like, "Well, no, he's a special gand." It's like, okay. I guess Gan means wand?
Yeah.
That's what I was
It's actually Gandalf. Tolkien created his name by using a couple of different things, and so Gandalf means like elf wand.
Well, look, it's time for us to have this conversation then. They spend a lot of time walking around not mentioning who he is. It's like she tries to make up names for him, and she's like, "What's this name?" And he's like, "Well, you can't give somebody a name. They already possess it." And it's like, is it Bill Dolph? No. Is it other thing that sounds similar to Gandalf? Nope, not quite there. They're dancing around calling him who he is. Almost like they might almost get really closely, and he's like, "Oh, that's almost it," sort of thing. It's like, we know what you're trying to do. You're hinting at who this guy is. And the name thing is just all of that. That's what that Gan conversation is. It's all the sly way.
Nod.
Yes, it's all winks and nods. Yeah, we know what you're doing, Rings of Power. Well, the rune guys show up,
And we don't like it.
and to lore accurate to the Harfoot's credit, they disappear really quickly. Because they're supposed to be good at that. And not Gandalf is standing around going like, "Oh, I don't. What happened?"
Oh my gosh, they're gone.
And then he has to awkwardly hide behind bushes. Did anyone have that? So they drop the snake in front, and he goes down and sees the snake, and he looks right at them, but doesn't see them for some reason. Did anyone have that thought when it finally shows them come out from behind it, where it's like, "Oh, you guys, clearly he could see that was just a cloth hanging there, and someone. There's no way he didn't see them hiding in the corner. Are you kidding me?" He looked right at you. This isn't hiding it. Look at these rags.
Yeah, it's a little bit too close to.
Yeah, this is natural
work.
to the rock formation, clearly.
Look at all the moss growing on the sandstone.
Yeah.
Wait.
Well, back to the dwarves.
Dwarves are starving to death.
Yeah,
Boy, that
They
does take long.
don't have money to go purchase food.
What's it been? 2-3 days or 2-3 months? I don't know, but
somewhere around there.
But the light is no longer growing the food, so they're in a desperate state, and they need to find the tunnels to dig their way out. I don't know why you need ladies to scream at the rocks to figure out the best way to dig through. But they call in
Well, remember
more
the mountain will
stone
talk to them.
singers. I guess. But
It's the dumbest bit of magic.
yeah, they call in the lady stone singers to scream at the rocks, and it's unsuccessful. That's what
I
happened.
don't like them.
He has this whole thing. We've trusted you for years, and you've guided us along, and now it's not working. Bye. They do have this moment where she shit talks the king in front of everybody, and I don't know if that would work in a natural monarchical situation. It's almost like a modern thought about, well, you know, he's being stupid. You would talk back to him. It's like, not to a king. You die. You wouldn't do this. Not in front of
I
everybody.
mean, maybe it, it is his daughter-in-law, and that's why she can get away with it.
But
when
every
somebody
time
else
there's
wouldn't be able
royalty,
to.
people talk back to them. Every time.
Yeah, you're right.
Real and Numenor, Gilgalad with the elves. They have zero respect for monarchical structures, despite the fact that they exist in this show. You're
Yeah,
just a
and they
guy. And it's like, yeah, but he's
They would have
he's
huge
absolute
amounts of
power.
reverence for the. Yeah.
Yes, they would.
Yeah, God, Gandalf barely even did that to the steward of Gondor. He's a well-known idiot and not even royalty.
Gandalf bowed to his horse. The king of all horses. He bowed to his horse. Him and Gimli and Legolas bowed to the king of all horses, Shadowfax. But
Yeah,
she's
why
like,
wouldn't you?
well, why wouldn't you? He's a pretty horse.
King of all horses.
I mean, he's going to show them the meaning of haste.
Once again, this is Disa knows better than everybody else, and all of these men are too stubborn. You're all stupid. I'm going to trash talk you. And then we have this awkward scene where he gets blisters, and they're like, you soft dwarf, you get blisters. And it's like, didn't in season 1 it show him mining?
Yes.
Yeah.
Being like the bossest guy with the hammer or whatever, cracking rocks.
He had
So
like a
now-
mining team he'd go with.
And then he physically rescued people in the cave-in, and now everybody's shit talking him like, "Oh, you're so soft," and it's like he's not adverse to mining. Like he doesn't not have tough hands. Like what is this?
At least it didn't imply that last season.
Well, especially when
Apparently,
he's the
between
prince.
last season and this season, he took a hiatus.
Yeah, his hands
Lost his calluses.
soft hands.
Yeah.
Got soft hands, son.
Well, on top of this, what if he becomes king again? They basically
Yeah,
beat him up.
Yeah,
'Cause he's
bullied
loser,
him for his
man.
milk money.
Yes. And it's like, was this a good idea? Once again, disrespect for monarchies, I guess. Like, it's really odd how this show interacts with people in ruling positions. Like, nobody has respect for them in any way. Or whatever, you're just a king, you idiot. Stop being stubborn. Here's
Being a
Disa
dwarf.
again, talking down to him. You're too stubborn, and I know best, and you need to make up with your dad because you're all stupid men. All right. And we see Elrond doing the only rational thing again. If no one will listen to me and the world is over, I'm going to build a boat and I'm getting out of here.
Nara.
Literally, this is what he's doing. He just leaves and starts making a boat. He's like, I'm going to leave.
Can you just swim like Galadriel?
He's not.
Yeah,
he's not.
you wuss.
He doesn't have women powers like she does. And it's funny.
It's
She
'cause he
comes to
doesn't have
talk to
hair.
him. Well,
Hair's
yeah.
a propeller.
Hair is a propeller. Silver nose.
Uh-huh.
Used to be a swimmer as
Yes.
a child.
And I have a lot of hair.
Well,
Anyway.
donate it to boating clubs. I don't know where I'm going with that. Let's move on. Let's move on. So she comes down to have a conversation with him. Hey, we're friends, and he's like, "You're a psycho. This is bad, and I don't trust you."
See, this is the line that I was referring to. when he was talking about she was saying, I was deceived by Sauron, and he's like, he plucked the very song of your soul note by note. He's like, no, this was already there inside of you the whole time.
You wanted this.
This wasn't you being deceived. This was you doing what you wanted to do.
Yeah, this was all her impetus. Once again, Elrond is the only person who knows what's really going on, and he ain't having it.
Yeah, that's no kidding.
Well, and she walks down to sort of smooth things over. She's like, I thought we were friends. And he's like, no, you psycho woman. No.
Not anymore.
Well, you gave him everything he wanted and then thanked him for it. Any masking as to what she did in season 1 is not happening with Elrond, the only person who knows what happened here. And he's done the same to Gogolad, as far as he can tell. And he's like, thus I'm making a boat, and I'm buggering off. She's like, we need you. And he's like, no. We're all screwed and under his manipulation. Once again, this is the role that Galadriel should be playing in the story. She should be the wise one standing back and going, don't trust him. Don't trust what's happening. This is weirdly backwards.
Like, literally, I mean, it could have been her. Like, why couldn't this be her character? I don't... Could have saved that.
Because then we wouldn't get the girl boss moments that were so pivotal to season 1.
Yeah, you could have. It just didn't have to be Galadriel. That's what's so strange about it.
Then you don't have the name recognition either.
He goes to talk to Círdan about what has transpired, and he's like, we can't trust it. And Círdan's like, yeah, but these rocks are really beautiful. And he's like, yeah, but how's it beauty when it's born of evil? And he's like, it's still beautiful.
And we get a shaven.
Yeah, he's shaved with
a
seashell or whatever. Yeah, everybody's been wooed by these stones, and we get this weird indication about what these rings can do, where he basically physically manipulates fish in the water, and you're like, wow, these are really powerful. Almost like the power to control the flesh, like Sauron has been talking about.
Perhaps a little on the nose.
Yeah, perhaps a little on the nose. You are wise to fear this power. You think? Blinding the ways it could be used for. What's that, Ross?
Well, I just remembered something when I was thinking about back when they were, chewing out Galadriel or whatever. Can I say the one thing about this show and how people pronounce things is the rolling R's. It is driving me insane. The overdone rolling R's.
The Mordor.
Sauron. Mordor. Like, what the... I hate it. It is the most infuriating thing. So overdone and silly. But, whatever. It's just one more thing in this show.
Is it just me, or does it feel like not much is resolved in season 2 or episode 2? Like, not much happens.
No.
Yeah, no.
This was the hardest episode for me to get through, by far.
I think my mother fell asleep during this one.
Oh, it's a great one to fall asleep in. You're not missing a thing.
Well, we have conversations. Nothing's talked about of any relevance. He passes out, and then they find some water. So they go get the water, and getting the water rings a bell. And it's funny. I heard some guys who watched the first 2 episodes, and they had almost nothing to say about what happened. They're like, yeah, Sauron was some goo. And they're like, that's it? And he's like, I mean, pretty much. Which makes it difficult to talk about this in any detail, because nothing of consequence happens. Like, all of this could have been cut.
Yeah. Well, and you know what's interesting is my first thought when I saw that bell thing, I'm like, oh, that's clever. And I'm like, I mean, I guess if you're an idiot, like, because you would have seen it. You would have been, seen it and then just cut the rope that had the dinger on it for the bell.
Or held it, and then because it only dings when the thing goes back down.
The bucket drops, yeah.
And so it's like, oh man, it's clever. And it's like, I mean, not really. That's actually really not clever. Like that. So I thought it was neat, and then thought better of it within, 10 seconds, and I went, no, that's actually dumb. Never mind.
Well, it makes incompetent buffoons vulnerable.
Yeah, I guess if you're really desperate for water, that's when you'll let that thing ring.
If you want to catch a doofus, it works.
A real dummy.
I was sitting there going, why didn't one of them jump up and stop it?
Yeah.
Well,
start winding it back up.
It rings for a while before one of them looks at it and goes, "Oh, I guess that's not very good."
That was the other thing where I'm like, are you guys not realizing that's a problem?
Well, they don't even.
I thought they'd let it ring a couple times. Yeah, they let it ring a couple times and look at it and go like, "Oh no," but it's too late. No, they didn't show that until way later.
They let it go. It just keeps ringing.
I also if you notice, she mentioned he's not breathing. We need water, and it's like, well, you're a little past that now. The water ain't gonna
breathing.
Water ain't gonna help the lack of breathing. I'm gonna be honest with you, but okay.
Well, it might actually, increase the lack of breathing if you keep shoving water in his face.
You'll really kill him. You'll really suffocate him now.
It might aggravate the lack of breathing condition.
Yeah.
Well, the Rune Boys show up with their masks.
Look at him. He's Mosey's.
Even though the stranger just passed out,
he's good to go.
Barely woke up. Everyone is fine.
Yeah, he was so bad that he collapses and he stands up and he's pretty good. Well, they show up
and now he's going to part the red. Oh no.
Well, he does magic with his new stick that was sitting by the well.
Mm-hmm.
And the stick,
just any old stick.
The stick makes him mega powerful, where he summons a tornado to the point where he can't stop it, and the Harfoots get yeeted off into nowhere. And that was what happened at the well.
That's what happened that day at the well.
The day at the well.
He killed those Harfoots.
Well, here's Celebrimbor making moon runes affected by the light because of Mithril, the light of the moon. Like he just invented it, I guess.
He super did.
This show, you know what it feels like with this show? That the show is almost entirely sort of callbacks. So that people who know anything about the lore can be like, I remember that thing. Oh, I remember that thing. It's almost like every time they do a reference to the other movies or the books, they want to turn and look at the screen and wink.
Yeah, seriously.
Like, remember runestones? I think you do.
I think you do.
Anyway, he's like, oh, is that Halbrand still here? And he's like, yep. Or she's like, yep. And here's one of everybody's favorite scenes. So Celebrimbor, who's this amazing inventor and creator of things, comes out with this umbrella. Now, see this umbrella? See it? As dumbly shaped as it happens to be, and as weirdly structured as this umbrella is. So he has this guy carrying it for him. So you see this? Mm-hmm. This odd umbrella. Now get ready for everybody's favorite moment. I'm trying not to get copywritten. So here's Celebrimbor, as wet as can be. That umbrella doesn't seem to be doing a lot there, Celebrimbor. I wonder if we could.
I appreciate
that once.
He should just look and be like, Jim, I appreciate the effort, but just go back inside.
Oh, Celebrimbor is soaking wet. He is soaking wet underneath this really oddly built umbrella. Like, look at how wet he is. Like, it's done nothing for his protection.
A load of nothing. That
is
hilarious.
It is funny.
I am embarrassed. I didn't notice that the first time.
He is incredibly soaked.
Oh.
I'm trying to get a zoom in, but he's just dripping. And it's like, well, what good did that do? And I guarantee
Make it
you
look like he's
some
real official.
I guarantee you some designer on set came up with this really pretty thing to do, and it was so impractical when they used it with this fake rain that basically the actor got soaked, despite the fact that whoever designed it thought it was like a really pretty umbrella. So they just had to act in this scene as if this umbrella does any good, despite the fact he is dripping wet. Anyway, they have a conversation. Go ahead, Jason.
This is the scene that I was talking about earlier, where we finally get to see Sauron using manipulation tactics with somebody.
Well, something he should be doing from the very beginning.
Exactly.
Yep.
See,
And we have to wait till episode 2 of season 2 before he starts manipulating anything.
Here's our sopping wet boy. And I know we're avoiding the conversation, but nothing really, like, he just talks to him and Sauron's like, oh, but there's word about the rings, they worked. And he's like, I knew it.
I knew they would.
And then the true creator toils, and
you don't get the credit you deserve.
All the accolades. Yeah.
Well, they make it back into his room, and he's like, oh, you created something really awesome. And he's like, I know. They don't appreciate you. We should make some more rings. He's like, I don't know. And he's like, well, you're good at this. I mean, a lot of conversation. Anything really to add about this conversation?
No, it was just one of those things where it is you saw it coming.
Makes
and you knew what the outcome was going to be. Yeah.
Like he's just like some minor flattery from a man who's dirty and a bum, and that's all it took.
Who was strictly told, don't trust this man, and he goes out and he's like, you're pretty good, and he's like, I think I trust this man.
Yeah, and it's just like, and then he gets convinced later on that, like, no, like, here's what's really happening. You haven't heard word yet? And it's like, dude, you trust this guy you knew for a couple weeks over Galadriel, who you've presumably known, or at least known of, for, what, 1,000 years, too? Like,
yeah.
Oh, my God.
Well, and as important as these events end up being, it cannot be understated that if Galadriel had just told Celebrimbor who Halbrand was, none of this would have happened.
Not
the only reason why he trusts him is it's like, oh, well, she said don't trust him, but I'm going to trust him. And it's like, if you'd have just told him, literally a series of events occur solely because Galadriel didn't want consequences for her actions.
Yep.
And
she didn't want to get into it.
Yes, all of the ensuing things of him basically manipulating Celebrimbor are because of her. And he's basically, he goes through this stuff of like, oh, well, you know, I'm someone else. I'm someone secret that you've never heard of. You know, he's like, oh, what is that? And then he basically kills all of the lights and makes the room go into darkness, which is not suspicious. And then comes crawling out of the fire, which also makes him look even more evil. But he creates this whole thing where it looks like he's descended from heaven.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh. Or it's like
which he has.
Well, at one point, yes. But I'm sure heaven isn't lit with these... It's almost like the most darkly lit sky with like evil red tones in the clouds. Celebrimbor is an idiot.
He's the biggest moron.
But this is enough to impress him. And he's like, hey, I'm Anatar. So we get another version of Sauron. Another Sauron changing shape, so to speak. And he's like, I give gifts. Trust me. What's that, Ross?
I realize they're trying to use a character from the lore or whatever, but when you spring them up like this, it's very funny. And I was just thinking how, like, you know, how rather than the goo monster flopping out of the mountain, you just have like sweeping shots and go to like this village and a crowd of people and have him turn and look and be like, oh, well, there he is again. Why not have him like turn out to be somebody who's been shown by Celebrimbor's side since season 1. Someone he
That would've been even
obviously
better.
trusts. Someone he obviously has spent a lot of time around. Someone who, like,
And you suddenly
you
realize
what
who he is in season 2, that he's also been
Yeah,
this guy.
yeah, he either has also been this guy or he's replaced him seamlessly. Something like that. Because when he just sprouts up and, like you said, like he stepped out of fire. Wait, you're trusting this man? Like, my God, he's clearly evil. Like, it's so much harder to believe as an audience member. Even, I mean, yes, we know the truth, but then have us not know the truth. Like, and then reveal it to us later. Like, oh, hey, by the way, this guy, either when Celebrimbor finds out, or maybe a little bit before, an episode or two, and have it be like this big reveal of like, by man, you can't stop Sauron. He'll just be anywhere. You got to be on your game all the time.
Well, once
Instead,
again, the
like,
outcome, because the outcome is known,
yeah,
it feels like they don't have to be as persuasive as they should be in convincing the characters of things. Like you're setting up something where it's like we're setting up a plot line that exists in season 1 and carries out through season 2 as to why Celebrimbor would trust this person. But the problem is they didn't think that ahead of time. They just know we have to get to the point where he manipulates him. So they just get a scene where he looks really angelic and pretty.
yeah,
And all the rest of us are sitting there going, well, that's dumb.
yeah. What a dope.
Well, yeah, because it was too easy.
Stupid.
Because we knew he was always going to be manipulated at some point. So instead of trying to justify it or give us a long-running reason for how Sauron is able to pull off manipulating Celebrimbor, because they already know where it's going to go, then they just bring us to that point really quickly. Because it's like, well, and then he believes him, and then we move on. And it's like, but you didn't earn this.
Right.
You didn't earn this situation, and now we're just watching as Celebrimbor makes poor decisions after he was told, don't trust Halbrand. Don't trust that guy. And he's like, oh, I think I'm going to trust him, though. It was very easy to convince me. And this is a massive impetus for the events that come forward.
Yeah.
Well, we get Gil-galad conversation, and he's like, well, I'm going to send you, because we haven't heard word from Celebrimbor, I'm going to send you to Eregion. And he's like, oh, I'm also sending Elrond. And she's like, oh, you're sending Elrond with me? It's like, no, I'm sending you with him. He's like, I'm putting Elrond in charge of stuff. And she's like, how could you? She seems very butthurt by not being placed in charge of whatever this expedition happens to be.
I kind of felt that she was hurt, but not as hurt as she would have been in season 1.
You're not wrong, but there's a lot of dirty looks of like, why am I not in charge of this? And why am I being slighted in this way?
What, you don't trust me?
Well, and you know what? To Gil-galad's at least credit, because Elrond is the biggest naysayer, maybe he should be the one put in charge, because we can't trust Galadriel because she's already been manipulated by Sauron. And it's like, she's like, well, I already know him. I know what he's like. And it's like, yeah. And he's already in your head, and we can't believe anything you say, you psycho woman.
Well, see, there's a line that he says, I think it's somewhere in this season, or in this episode, where Gil-galad and Galadriel are talking, and he says that we know that Sauron has this ability where if he has deceived you once, he's in your head basically, and he can do it as many times as he wants. And this, to me, goes back to that scene with the orcs in the first season where he gets stabbed to death. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute. He would have had his manipulative little fingers all over these people. He would have had no problem getting them to do what he wanted them to do. I don't know why we're doing this.
A surprising inconsistency in a well-written story.
Yeah.
Well, they send out letters to the dwarves and being like, we got some pretty rings for you guys, and then it's over. Final thoughts of episode 2, starting with Silver. A silver.
At least it wasn't as bad as the first one.
It felt more boring than the first. Like, getting through the conversation of that episode was a slog.
No.
Yeah, it felt more drawn out, long, but I don't know. I didn't like the first one more for some reason.
No, you can dislike or like whichever one you want. So you thought this one was more interesting?
So,
what made it more interesting?
I mainly like that you could see they're trying to go like, oh, look, Sauron's being manipulative, which I've been waiting for forever. And that's basically it. All the stuff going on with the stranger and the Harfoots there, I really don't care. Nothing's happening there. He found a stick.
He did. He broke it, too. The stick's no longer...
Yeah, that's what happened. He found stick, he broke it. In the story.
Stick break.
Stick break.
And
to the episode's credit, to the season's credit compared to season 1, it feels like the story is actually finally crawling forward. Where it just wasn't going anywhere in the first season. Where it's actually, we're finally being dragged in a sort of plot direction that we weren't aware of before. Which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything more to add, Silver? On your thoughts on episode 2?
No, there wasn't much else than that.
All right, Ross.
This episode was a slog. I do agree with Val, though, that it is nice to actually see him, Sauron, being somewhat of a manipulator and doing something that makes sense for him.
An actor in the story, as opposed to being acted upon.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of just going along with this lunatic woman. So it did that at least, but everything else in this episode was just such a slog. The stuff in Rune, the stuff with the elves, it all freaking sucked. It was just so boring. This like
no, I'm trying to drag you guys across the finish line of discussing this episode.
Like, episode 3 for me is a little bit more interesting, but good lord, is this episode tough, because it's just thank you long form TV shows. Like, there's just certain episodes people complain about filler and serialized TV. Man, there's some rough filler in some of these long form TV shows that are trying to be prestige, and this is one of them. There's about maybe 20 minutes worth of this episode that's actually worth anything, and everything else is just take it or leave it. Don't need it. So, I mean, even my notes for this episode are so much shorter than the last two, than the last one and the next one. So yeah, that shows you where I was at.
There was a lot of filler this time around.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Jason?
To me, I thought this episode was worse than the first one. It just possibly because one, it cast a bad light on stuff I'd seen in the first episode, and then, like you said, this seemed like so much filler and so much of a slog that it was like, can we just move past this already?
I'm trying. We got to discuss the problem is when they don't present it in an interesting, engaging way, it's hard to review it in an interesting, engaging way. Where it's like, well, this happened. Yep. Anyway.
Yeah, and at least when it's like hilariously bad, you can like be like, what the hell, and like maybe try and come up with something that could have done better, or just make fun of it. But this was just boring.
Well, that's one commentary.
The worst form of all.
That's one commentary I heard about The Acolyte, is The Acolyte was entertaining to review as bad as it was, because it was so bad it was funny. Whereas this is just bad and slow and boring. And it's hard to be engaged with something that's bad in that way, because it's hard to laugh at how stupid it is. Like season 1 had a lot we could laugh about. This one is just like, oh, it's not going anywhere, and it's slow, and people are making poor choices, but they're really dragging out that. And it's like, nothing's happening in the desert with the stranger and the Harfoots. Nothing. Like what do we know that happened? They're walking. He's worried about using magic, needs a stick. They find Poppy, they get a stick, and it goes poorly. And someone wants to kill him. That's mostly what we got. At this point, well over 2 hours of content. Your writing's got to be snappier. It's got to be tighter than this. Like, imagine other shows, like in this show, them trying to explain sort of the temperament of different types of characters and different types of people. The story building, the character building, the world building. If you were to go and look at Lord of the Rings, like imagine Hobbiton in Lord of the Rings. They describe exactly what Hobbiton is and what this world is like in what feels like no time. They just show people being hobbits, and you know exactly what type of people they are. You don't have to have long run-out exposition. You don't have to have a lot of explanation. You don't have to drag the show out where multiple cutbacks to the hobbits doing things. You just get familiar with the hobbits. You get close to, and you understand these characters through character building, through storytelling. And it's like they don't understand how to do that. Like tight storytelling. One of the best scenes when it comes to describing certain things is that scene in Ghostbusters, where they go into the elevator. In that one scene, it's so tightly written, where they at no point do they explain what this equipment is, what they're doing with it, or whatever. And it's basically like they're in an elevator, and he's like an unregistered, basically a nuclear device on your back, and then they back away. And it says so much of like, this guy's really clever to invent this sort of thing. It's experimental technology. It's a prototype in order to catch ghosts. It's dangerous. The humor involved with the characters where they recognize the difficulty of what this is and oh, I'm wary about this, and their sort of personalities as they back away from the equipment, and sort of the bland personality of Egon who invented. Like, there's so much you can get out of what is essentially a sentence or two. And you can see good writing versus bad writing when it comes to a show like this. You're given infinite money, practically, and infinite time, an hour long plus, when some of these episodes are an hour and 15.
Yeah.
And you can't pull it across the finish line and give me world building. You can't give me character building. You can't give me reasons to give a shit about what's happening. And you have an hour plus to do this.
Hey, remember Star Trek The Next Generation had 45 minutes? X-Files, 45 minutes? Like, all these shows like that were serialized TV. It was like not every episode was even about the main story. They had 45 minutes to get a plot across and get you to care.
Ross.
And often successfully.
More happened in the 3 episodes of Lord of the Rings, and we've had more hours of Rings of Power.
Yep.
So much more has happened in the trilogy of Lord of the Rings. An adventure occurred. And we have more time with Rings of Power, more time at this point, and it feels like we've done nothing.
Well,
nothing to value.
Not only did they introduce Boromir, show him to be maybe a little untrustworthy, and then redeem him in the one movie of Lord of the Fellowship.
Exactly.
But they did that with other characters throughout the whole show, and that's less than, like you said, less than what we've had of Rings of Power. Like, it's crazy to me that they I maybe at the end of the season, this is me just spitballing here. Maybe whoever wants to can talk about this. Whenever I watch the show, I always think of how TV has changed. Like how everyone wants a prestige show, less episodes, but they're more artful and more expensive, and theoretically are doing more with the characters. But are they anymore? Like, everyone wants. Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, what's the Netflix one? Stranger Things. But good Lord, this sucks. Like, this episode is just nothing going on because all in the name of having a slow burn. And it's just, what are we doing?
Yeah. Where there's a whip, there's a way, everybody. I will drag us across this podcast try to
I've never
finish
been so
this.
excited for episode 3 of season 2 of Rings of Power as I am right now. At least something happens in this freaking episode coming up.
Thanks for joining us then for this episode. Thanks for hanging out with us for episode 2. Feel free to leave your thoughts. And we're going to run out of here kicking and screaming. And please find us for episode 3. Goodbye.
If you like the show, follow Rhett, Jason, Ross, and Silver, the world's most lethally stupid internet personalities, on Twitter at DG Podcast or on Instagram at Distracted Gamers. If you liked or hated what you heard here today, you can email them at thedistractedgamers@gmail.com and share your feelings. Not that Jason would care, since he hasn't any, of course.
Oh my God, it's so juicy.